Programming books are literally the biggest waste of time. I know your professor loves making you buy them, and occasionally it's fun to buy shiny new programming books to make you feel like you're learning something new. I've been there multiple times. But look, this older, wiser, and more experienced version of myself would advise you against them, because the amount of time you invest on reading programming books has almost little to no return. So they're basically just expensive paperweight. Well, literally, they're expensive and they're heavy as f***. So instead of wasting your time and hard-earned money in programming books, in this video, I'll show you a system that works way better for learning to code, or if you're already experienced, picking up a new programming language. And best of all, this system is fun and does not cost you a single penny. So toss away your programming books and let's get started. Hey folks, if you're new here, my name is Utsav. I'm a software engineer based in Seattle with over 20 years of experience in the industry, and I'm currently a senior software engineer at Microsoft. My goal with this channel is to mentor you around 5 key pillars of career development: technical skills, engineering efficiency, mindset, entrepreneurship, and financial freedom. So if that sounds interesting, consider subscribing and follow me at Utsavized for monthly Q&As and behind the scenes. The first reason why I think programming books are a waste of your time and money is because it's a very fixed and predetermined learning path and progression system. Someone wrote that book somewhere in their office and it's designed to appeal to the masses. But the truth is that we all have different learning styles, and what works for me versus what works for you are wildly different things, right? So the same book will not work for everybody. I remember my first programming language book when I was learning to code many years ago, and after we finished loops, there was the first project where we had to print various shapes and sizes in different orientation using loops and asterisks. And I get the idea that it's meant to teach you how to learn to utilize loops with a character and kind of print out different shapes. And a lot of kids in that group that were learning with me were super excited about the project. And I was like, what the f***? Like, this sounds like super uninteresting. I was more into trying to make a game, or even if it's a simple Q&A. So even something simple like that, you can see where some people may be super excited about a project or doing certain things with what they've learned, versus for me, it was completely different. I wanted to do something completely different. And that's where books fall apart, because they will have a certain recommendation of a project or an exercise for everybody to do, and you may or may not like it. And once you don't like what you're doing, it's really hard to learn and remember the purpose of what you're doing. So my point being, what excites you or how you learn, what pace you learn is different than the other individual or me or anybody else, and a book cannot adapt or cater to all of us. The second major drawback of programming books is that the information gets outdated so quickly. New versions of programming languages, new features, even new programming language themselves are getting added at a rapid pace. I remember seeing this article about C#11 and its new features regarding list and all being launched, I think April last year, and in November C#12 is out already. So imagine you buying a book early last year about C#11, and that's almost outdated by the time C#12 rolls around less than a year later. Just an example of how fast books get outdated, right? And look, if you've ever tried to publish a book, it takes years from idea to actually getting published and hitting the shelves, because it's not just about writing what you know. You have to talk to publishers, distributors, and things like that. So by just that virtue of how long the pipeline is, it naturally makes sense that books lag behind when it comes to providing the latest information, as opposed to something online that can either get deprecated or updated readily when the information changes, right? Books basically, when they're outdated, become expensive paperweights, and that's their second drawback. The third reason why I don't want you to invest on programming books is programming books generally tend to cover the specifics of a programming language, right? And that's fine, but the core concept of programming, like the core fundamentals, hasn't changed for decades. The core constructs behind programming, your basics like loops and variables and things like that, to more advanced stuff like data structures and stuff, they're all the same. They haven't changed for a while. So investing on a programming books makes no sense, because they are teaching you a specific of the programming language and not really the core concepts, right? And look, I'm not saying books don't have value. They do have value, but there are certain kinds of book that provide way more value versus what I'm talking about right now. For example, any book that teaches you a vague concept or a programming paradigm or best practices tends to age very well. And those books provide way more value than, say, a programming language that's teaching you C# 12 or latest and greatest in Go. For example, I have a few books here. These books have remained largely the same for many years, if not decades. And even today, a lot of this information holds true. I can read a lot of this core concept around artificial intelligence, and then the models or the algorithms haven't changed that much. Sure, they may have evolved into something that we find in today's learning patterns, but the basics are still there. Or the idea of refactoring code and how to make it maintainable and reusable and extensible, that hasn't changed, right? So what I'm saying here is any book that teaches you paradigms or best practices, they provide way more value than programming books. Sure, even that evolves, but the pace that evolves in or changes is very slow compared to how fast programming concepts or features or even languages evolve and get added. So at this point, you're probably, okay, I'm sold. I'm not going to buy programming books. So what do you suggest I do instead if you want to learn coding or pick up a new programming language? Well, here's the system I'm talking about. It's divided into 3 stages. Let's go over the first stage. The first stage is to pick a programming language, obviously, right? And this could be out of demand, or this could be something you're interested in, something that your job requires, or something that some tech guy you followed tweeted over and you're excited about, right? Doesn't matter. Let's take Python, for example. So you want to learn Python. Then you want to go over and look for documentation for Python. Just go online and search for it. 9 out of 10 times, any respectable or open source programming language will have very detailed documentation in their websites. So just go through that and follow what they're teaching in the basics and the control patterns and stuff like that until you finish loops. And look, if you are an absolute beginner, this may take you a couple of months to go over. And if you have learned 5 or 6 or 7 programming languages already, this may be half a day for you. That doesn't matter. That's the beauty of it. You control your pace, right? But once you're done with loops, you want to move on to stage 2. So stage 2, you want to find a project to exercise what you've just learned. Finding projects are pretty straightforward. Either you already have a couple of ideas, and if you don't, just search for it online and see beginner projects or projects to exercise loop or practice loop. And hopefully you can find a cool project that is not printing shapes with asterisks. Games are usually good ones, Q&As, different kind of linear progression systems. Those are good examples. Chess is one that a lot of people try, but I'll tell you, if this is your first programming language, you're likely not going to be able to implement chess fully because it's more complicated. And if you do, you'll go on to do great things in life. But tic-tac-toe is a great one, especially with 2 players without AI. But even with AI, a single player version isn't beyond reach within your first year of learning to code. Or you can build a calculator, a basic one, and then move on to an advanced one that's very deterministic, or any unit conversion for that matter. And those are good projects because they aren't some random project where some random dude decided is good to practice loops or whatever you've learned so far. These are tangible projects. You've used them throughout your life and you've seen other people use those things in their life. And that's the real magic of learning to code and being able to put that into action right away. And a bit of a tangent here, but I guess that's the word I was missing, is magic. Books lack that magic because they are designed to appeal to the masses. And yeah, sure, like 5% people may find that book really magical and the project's really awesome and they learn a lot of things from it. But if you remember my example, I just didn't connect with the example they were giving. So then that makes you not feel the moment of magic. Versus if you do your own projects, you have your own idea about how you want to use the principles that you've learned into action, you get to see that magic. Imagine learning to code and within a week building a tic-tac-toe game and playing that with your brother. Isn't that awesome? Or using a currency conversion tool that you wrote in your spare time with your parents when you visited Bangkok, for example. That's magic. I'm getting carried away. Let's move on to step 3. So in the third stage, you will either realize that you have learned everything and you created a project and you've blown it out of the park, then move on to more advanced topics. If not, you'll realize that, okay, you overestimated your capabilities and you really don't understand exactly how these things work, like the concepts so far that you've learned. So revisit them. And then you'll quickly identify where your skills are lacking and where you need to learn more or practice more. This is a repetitive process. You keep repeating this until you finally reach to some advanced topic like complex data structures like trees and data structures like graphs. And this is, my friend, where you're ready to party with the big fellas. But that's a topic for another day and another video. Check out this other video where I share my strategies on remembering and recalling information from over 100 technical books. And I think that could be useful in conjunction with this 3-step process of learning a new programming language. Like this video if you found it useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more. Cheers.